how we start a video, with a subpar wheelie. Followed by a stoppie. So what is up, guys? Welcome to another Motard Steve video, and if you've read the title, you've probably got a couple assumptions going on in your head, depending on which brands you like. If you know my channel, obviously you know I have a 2017 Husqvarna 701 Supermoto. It's great, I love it, it's a dream bike, it's amazing. KTM just recently announced its KTM 690 SMCR. I believe it's 2019 year model thing. And, you know, a lot of people are going crazy about it over the internet. And, you know, rightfully so. It's great that there's a SMC back. But I made a statement in the 701 group as well as some other places, and people got a little pissed off about it. And my statement simply was, hey man, I'm all for the 690 SMC being back, but I'm really not excited for it. I really don't care much for it. And I know what you're thinking, bro, it's a new KTM, dude. They don't make a single bad bike. And, you know, I agree with you. I'm not saying the 690 is a bad bike. That's the takeaway a lot of people seem to took away from that statement, is that I was saying it was a terrible, bad bike and that it shouldn't exist. No, without the original SMCR, this bike wouldn't even be around. So there's no way of me saying that the new SMC is a terrible bike or something. I was just saying that as a Husqvarna rider, a 701 rider more specifically, I don't really care too much for it. Wet roads. You know, but basically I made a statement saying that as someone who owns a 701, I'm really not too wowed by the new 690. And I got a couple of different responses. One of them, which was probably the most ignorant, rage-inducing response that I got, was, you know KTM owns Husky, right? Like, I'm just super ignorant to the fact that KTM owns Husky.
Duh! I know that!
You look at the stock sprocket on the 701, it has a KTM stamp on it. You look at the oil filters when you pull them out for the first time, they have KTM written on them. If you order factory parts for the oil change, the filters say KTM on it. If you pop the seat, it says KTM on it. You would have to be blind to own a Husky and not know that the brand was owned by KTM. It's been owned by them since 2013. Come on, which we'll talk a little bit more on that in a second. And part of my argument was, I don't care much for it because, big deal, the 690's finally catching up to the 701. And boy, did that piss a lot of people off too. Because I don't really know if it's because they just don't pay attention, or maybe they truly are ignorant and don't really know. I don't know. Let me go ahead and give you guys a quick little history lesson just to give you some context. I'll try to make this quick. But Husqvarna has been making bikes since 1903. They made bicycles before that, but in 1903 they decided to finally make a motorcycle. And it was the same year that Harley Davidson started making motorcycles. So essentially, they were basically bicycles with motors on them. Very bare bones, and at first Husqvarna wasn't even making its own engines. It was just importing engines from another place. It wasn't until a couple, like I think the 20s, where they actually started making their own motors. So Husqvarna originally started making muskets. That is why the logo is the way it is. That is actually the rear iron sights of a musket. In case you didn't know, Husqvarna originally started making muskets. That is why the logo is the way it is. That is actually the rear iron sights of a musket. In case you didn't know. Now, that was the same year that Harley Davidson started making motorcycles. So at the time, that was kind of the competition. You know, V-twin engines was kind of the big competition back then. So when they started making motorcycles, they were making V-twins essentially, and they actually were involved in road racing and stuff like that around the 20s and 30s, mainly with like 500cc, you know, V-twin engines. It wasn't until about the 60s and 70s that Husqvarna started getting really deep into like enduro and off-road racing, winning crap tons of world-class enduro championships and winning a lot of Baja 1000 awards. Eventually, Husqvarna, I guess maybe they ran into money problems. You know, it's really not certain what happened, but eventually Husqvarna was bought out by the MV Agusta company, is some other name it was called, but essentially it was something that was owned under the MV Agusta company. So they got bought out by MV Agusta, and then a couple of people in that company were like, well, hey, I don't want to move all the way to Sweden to make these motorcycles. So Husqvarna started getting made in Italy. After that, Husqvarna was bought out by BMW. And BMW's plan for the brand was to turn it into the two-wheeled Mini Cooper equivalent of, you know, their BMW group. And they ditched the Husqvarna name and rebadged it as Husqvarna. That's where you get bikes like the Husqvarna 570, which is an absolute monster of a bike. But you know, they started making Husqvarnas, which were basically weird Husqvarnas made by BMW. Then it wasn't until about like 2013, somewhere around in there, that BMW sold off the Husqvarna name and Husqvarna name to KTM. And that's when KTM decided to dissolve the Husqvarna name and bring back Husqvarna. You know, when KTM brought back Husqvarna, they did probably the smartest thing any company could do when bringing back another brand. They injected a lot of their own current bikes into the brand. That's why you hear a lot of people say Husqvarnas are basically KTMs, because in a big way, they pretty much are. You can get an orange KTM, or you can get a white KTM and call it a Husqvarna. I know that may sound insulting to the heritage and all that, but it's essentially pretty true. The bikes aren't super different, although they do have subtle differences, which is something to bear in mind with today's topic. You know, like for instance, the 350s, the Huskies have different suspension setups as well as a different frame construction, and you know, little subtle differences like that usually happen in between models, and it's been like that for a little bit. If you look at the old 690 versus the old 2016 701, it was pretty much like that. The 701 had a bigger gas tank, the suspension was a little softer, the 690 hit a little bit harder with the fueling. It also had a way better dash. I really wish they'd go back to that dash because I had a tachometer and everything. But for some reason we get stuck with this junk, but whatever. It's bare bones, it gets the job done, who cares? Sorry for the long-winded history lesson. That brings us to today. 2017, this bike, they redid the engine and got the new Euro 4 engine and everything, which made 75 more, not 75 more, but 75 horsepower, 5 horsepower more than the previous year. It also vibrates less because of the second counterbalancer shaft, and the engine was imported from the 690 Duke. But what's funny about that statement is the 690 Enduro R didn't get the updated engine until now. That's so weird that they let the 701 go 2 years with the better engine. You know, and someone made a good point, and it was kind of what I thought too. You know, when KTM bought Husky, I'm pretty sure it makes sense from a business standpoint to try to differentiate the brands, because why would you want to have two brands of motorcycles that are making exactly the same bikes? You want to try to differentiate the brand, which is why I think we have the RC 390 and the Duke 390, and now we have the Vit Pillin and Smart Pillin, however the hell you pronounce those. That's why I think we have different bikes like that now, and there's not just a KTM version of each, because I think they're trying to differentiate the brand, which is a very smart business move. But, like I said, I made a statement saying that the 701 was ahead of the 690 and it was finally catching up. So like I said, that's very true. Since 2017, the 701 has had the better Euro 4 motor that has more power and doesn't vibrate as much. And in my opinion, if it's vibrating less, it would obviously be a little better. Anyway, moving on. So, those of you KTM fanboys that got salty when I said the 701 was a step ahead of the KTM up until now, there's your facts. It was. On the spec sheet, it was ahead of the old KTM, which is kind of cool now that it's even, because now I can stop like having OCD about it, being like, why is it like this? Good thing I got my Viking cycle jacket in case I crash. Quick advert, please use MOTARD12 to get 12% off www.vikingcycle.com products. Woo! Now back to your regular scheduled program. So, quite obviously, guys, I understand that KTM's a big part of the Husqvarna name. So, would I hate on KTM? Of course not. Do I think the new 690 is a terrible bike? Of course not. But here is why I don't think it's that big of a deal and why it doesn't really impress me as a 701 owner. Keep that in mind. I'm speaking from someone who owns a 701. If you don't own either a 690 or a 701, we'll get to you later. So, quite obviously, guys, I understand that KTM's a big part of the Husqvarna name. So, would I hate on KTM? Of course not. Do I think the new 690 is a terrible bike? Of course not. But here is why I don't think it's that big of a deal and why it doesn't really impress me as a 701 owner. Keep that in mind. I'm speaking from someone who owns a 701. If you don't own either a 690 or a 701, we'll get to you later. But as someone who owns a 701, here's why I'm not freaking out. Because the new things about the 690 are obviously the new engine, which we've had for 2 years, so we don't really care about that. Then you have the quick shifter, which, yeah, quick shifters are nice. I've never used one, but I understand how they work. I'm sure it's pretty nice. On the street, though, I really don't think it's going to come that much into play. Of course, more on that later. So, quick shifter is new, factory equipped with a quick shifter. Also, it has traction control, which we'll talk about this in a second, but yeah, sure, that's great. Traction control is new. Then the next thing that I can think of is it has race ABS or a Supermoto ABS setting, which essentially is where it turns ABS off for the rear and leaves it on for the front. For instance, right now, my ABS is turned off. That's what this light is for. That means ABS is off. Right now, ABS is completely off. I don't have it on the front or the rear. Now, you may think, well, hey, that kind of sounds like some cool stuff. Why do you not think the 690 is great because of that? Well, here's why. All right, it's factory standard equipment. Everybody knows that when a bike gets more electronic stuff on it, you're going to pay money for it. Now, I know this is probably a terrible example because we're talking about high-end brands like Husqvarna and KTM, but let's look at the Honda Grom for just a second. Bear with me. Look at the Honda Grom. You can buy the regular version for like a little over $3,000. I don't really know the exact numbers, but it's not important. You look at the ABS version of the Honda Grom, it's about, I think, $200 to $300 more. The fact of the matter is, the one with electronic aids costs more money. And here's the thing, you may not, I don't think you need ABS on a Grom. I'm sorry, but you don't need ABS on a Grom. That rear brake is not super sensitive. You have to stomp on it to lock it up. I'm sorry, but you do. Unless you're just a terrible rider, you don't need ABS. Really? I mean, then again, it does kind of have a good idea. So, my big thing is, all those electronic aids are going to cost extra money. I bet the new 690 is going to cost at least $1,000, if not more, than the 701. Now, you may think $1,000's not that much money, and for some people it's not. Me, it's really not, but the principle is this. I don't want to pay extra money for stuff I don't really care or want. I don't need a quick shifter. I don't have a quick shifter on this. I don't need it. I don't care about it. I don't need the special ABS setting. If I did, I'd go buy the $50, $60, whatever dongle that you can buy for this, and bam, you've got the same ABS setting available to you. And just like the quick shifter, if I want a quick shifter, I can go spend the $350, $400, whatever it is, and put a quick shifter on this bike. And, you know, the only thing I don't think you can put on this bike that the new 690 has is the traction control. Like I said, I don't think. I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I'm intelligent on that and well-versed on that, because I don't know. There may be a way to put it on here, but as far as I know, I don't think there is. Like I said, that's as far as I know. Someone smarter and much more experienced than me could probably tell me in the comments if you can put traction control on this thing somehow. And that's really why I'm not too crazed about the 690, simply because all those new electronic aids, for the most part, you can put on your 701. But the great thing about it is with the 701, you have the freedom of choice. You don't have to choose those things. by default straight from the factory. You're not paying for those things. So if you're someone like me who doesn't want those things, you don't have to pay for them when you buy the 701, or if you already have one. And then of course, if you're someone that decides they want that stuff later on, you can always put it on there. And traction control. I mean, yeah, that's not a big deal to me either, simply because traction control is all right here in your right hand. You ever watch Twist of the Wrist? Keith Code tells you straight up. He's like, proper throttle application in a turn will guarantee that your suspension is weighted correctly and that you have proper traction on the road. In any way, am I saying the 690 is a bad bike? Of course not. It's a great bike. It's just as good as the 701. But as someone who already owns one, I'm not too enthused about it. I mean, sure, it's cool. Maybe that's going to drive a little bit more competition. I mean, I say competition, but they're owned by the same brand. But, maybe that will drive a little bit of back and forth in between the brands. Maybe they'll do something different. Maybe they'll kind of feed off each other. I don't know. We'll see how it goes. So you're probably asking, well, what's the better bike? Well, honestly, the answer to that question is probably not an answer you want. And that is, well, it depends. It honestly depends. If I didn't have either or, what I would base it off of is, well, if I'm going to do track days, maybe I'd get the 690. It's already got the quick shifter on it, it's got the traction control, and it's got the ABS for it, for backing in around turns. I mean, it's already pretty much set up. And if the trend continues from the old bikes, chances are the KTM is going to be a little bit harder. And when I say harder, I mean the fuel map will be slightly more aggressive. The suspension will probably be a little stiffer. And body-wise, it will probably be a little more slimmer. I don't necessarily know if that means it will weigh any less, but it will probably just be a little more slim. And I know some people like that. And then, if you're more into just street riding and hooliganing and stuff like that, the 701 will probably suit you better. It's probably going to have softer suspension. It's probably going to have a little bit more fuel capacity. And, overall, the mapping's going to be a little more smoother. I'm really saying it's very minute. It's very little differences between these bikes. For the big part, you're still basically comparing apples to apples. It's like, do you want Gala apples or do you want Fuji apples? It's very much the same stuff here, guys. There's not a huge difference when it comes to this. So this is where I asked you guys, what do you guys think about it? Let me know down in the comments below. What would you rather buy, a 701 or the new 690? If you already have a 701, are you looking to switch? Let me know that down below too. Let me know what you guys think down below. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to click the subscribe button, give it a thumbs up,